Hello, bonjour, namaste, ni hao, and ohio, everybody. What is going on? It is Gale here. Welcome back to the YouTube channel once again for another Danmachi video. And today we have a series of tweets by Fujino Omori, the author of Danmachi, and he decided to do a little bit of a what if regarding, of course, the addition of the Loki Familia in the Freya Familia Wargames. Of course, a lot of you guys are aware, if you have watched season 5, that in the Freya Familia Wargames versus, of course, Hestia and the Alliance, the Loki Familia is not participating. They were rejected to participate by the guild, and of course, as a result, they are not taking part in the Familia Wargames. Of course, with them being in the Wargames, a lot of things would be different, and obviously I and many others have spoken about this being a potential what if that could be covered, something that we can talk about. And in fact, actually, before this tweet came out, I was, I usually try and make a list of video ideas that I can usually do. And usually I've been trying to do more of these Danmachi style videos, as of late, over the last few months since season 5 came out. I've been trying to do more of these type of videos. And one of the videos I wanted to actually do was a what if on whether, the Loki Familia being a part of the war games. Unfortunately, Omori got one step ahead of me and actually did the what if on his own Twitter account, of course, right? So we're going to go through that. I'll still do my own iteration of it because I think Omori obviously didn't really consider a lot of factors in his what if, right? From what I've seen, I only just skimmed through it literally just to see, if he tackled certain points and stuff like that. And it seems like he kind of missed certain details. And in fact, he even said that this situation that he's brought up is a direct competition between the Loki Familia and the Freya Familia. So there's no introduction of the Alliance, the Hestia Familia, Bell, and so on and so forth in this what if. So it's a very bare bones what if in that sense, but I want to see what he has to say. Of course, he is the author. He has a better idea on where he judged the characters to be power level wise, power scaling wise, of course, right? And so I want to see what he has to say. Now, of course, if you guys are going to enjoy this video, remember to leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel for more content, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What if the Loki Familia was a part of the Freya Familia War Games? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Remember, keep in mind that all of this is going to contain, if I'm not mistaken, I made sure to check this, all of this will contain information that we have seen up until the point in which the anime has aired. So from episode 1 to episode 11 of the anime, and I assume, of course, up to Sword Rotoria 12. Which is, of course, that's where the timeline is basically. So keep that in mind that just for the record, you have, of course, Finn, Gareth, Riveria at level 6. You, of course, have, Ice, Tiona, Tione, Bet also at level 6, and so on and so forth. You have everybody basically involved in some way, shape, or form. Of course, Lafia is also going to be coming off of, Sword Rotoria 12, a much stronger Lafia, a Lafia that's training and everything, right? And, of course, has trained a lot since, of course, the events of, everything that's happened in Sword Rotoria. So stronger Lafia as well, and all the other cast members who have obviously taken on Evilus in Sword Rotoria, right? So keep that in mind, okay? Now, let's take a look at Amores Thread and see what he has to say. If Loki Familia had participated in the faction war, maybe. So he decided to go for basically, just a general frontline look basically at everything that's going on. So you have Eyes and Gareth versus Dotarl, Hegni, and Bet. Sorry, this is a very interesting one. So I assume this is basically like all the interesting. I'm kind of confused as to how he's kind of portrayed this basically. So okay, yeah, no, I see what he's done here. So let's use this as a translation because Google's translation on the Twitter thread is a little bit wonky. So we'll try and do this basically. So if the Loki Familia had entered the faction war games, maybe then you would see Eyes and Gareth versus Otarl and Hegni, which that could be interesting. I mean, the thing is, right, Otarl is a very big, like, obviously he's a level 7 character, the strongest in Orario, of course, right? But his powers, I feel like, from whatever we've seen and everything, I feel like he's very much a sort of defense focused character, very big tank kind of character. And of course, you know, if you play Danmachi Battle Chronicle and even in Danmimo by extension, you know, the guy was always very much designed to be a tank character, always high defense, you know, some form of counter mechanic or something along those lines, basically, right? So it makes sense putting the tanks against one another on the front lines. Eyes versus Hegni works. I mean, very similar characters in that, you know, Hegni with Dainslift can go kind of crazy, as well as Eyes with Ariel and, you know, all that sort of jazz, of course, right? Avenger and all, you know, she can also pop off in a way. Obviously, this is against humans, not monsters, so she is at a little bit of a disadvantage there. Remember that Eyes' techniques, right? Eyes is a very interesting character, you know, in that, she's not really one that does well against humans as much as she does well against monsters. She's an insane character to go up against monsters, you know, but she is also a little bit, not on the vulnerable side. I would say vulnerable is the wrong word here. She can't really extract her pure performance, her max performance against, you know, regular humans, you know. So that is, or regular mortal beings, I should say, non-monsters in this situation. So that's going to be interesting. Then you have Bet versus Alan, of course, right? And then Tiona and Tione versus the Gulliver brothers, which would be, that would be actually quite fun to see. The sisters versus the brothers. That is quite interesting. And then, of course, he mentions that the rear guard is outlawed, or just like a lawless area where it's basically like anything goes kind of thing. But he said that the main focus of the rear guard fight would probably be between Riveria and Hayden, which can make sense, basically, can make sense. And then he goes on to say, basically from episode 11 onwards of the anime, it basically becomes Sword of Rotoria part 2 and not Danmachi season 5. Hestia Familia and all of those guys are kind of just left in the dust, kind of. They're there, but they're not there, kind of, you know. They're kind of ignored, basically, in a way, which I disagree with. I think, you know, you have to include the fact of, you know, you have Horime's level boost, you have Bell involved as well, and that will just change so much of this entire fight. In all honesty, it really will change the fight drastically. So I feel like him excluding that detail, in my opinion, is in that sense a little bit you know, wrong, of course, right? But obviously, again, that's something that I can do in my what if, but potentially, you know, maybe include that in my what if. I was really hoping that the season would be done, because I wanted the season to be done in order to make that video, right? Because I think it would have made a lot more sense to see, you know, now that we know who, you know, once everything, you know, was settled and the dust is cleared and everything, and we have an idea on who's participating, who's coming in and who's not coming in. Of course, we knew in episode 12 we would have probably seen the addition of Ryu and potentially the hostess of fertility coming into play as well, you know, Chloe and Lenora as well being added into the fray. Maybe some more people would have come in, who knows, right? We knew Asfi was heading to the battlefield potentially as well, based on, you know, her going away from Hermes after watching, you know, Belle get absolutely beaten up in episode 11, right? So it's not impossible that that would have been the case, of course, right? Is that we would have seen more people come into play, of course, right? So obviously you might be wondering, where's Finn in all of this? Finn is leading the rear guard, basically. He is, of course, going to be the tactician, the commander of the group, right? And he is planning on shooting a Tarl with his spear. And of course, Hayden also is like, nah, not happening. Tarl's not gonna sit around. He's gonna go into the front line immediately. And then, of course, you're gonna see, obviously, Raul, Van, and all the high second level adventurers, of course, right? The people who are effectively the second string, right? The second, the tier just below the executives. They're probably going at it against one another. Van, of course, leading the second level adventure, second string on the Freya Familia side, and then Raul and Anna Kitty and everybody else being on that other side of the coin as well, right? Raul being effectively like a deputy to Finn, dealing with, of course, the second string and handling them, basically. And then, of course, you have Eyes, Gareth, and Hegni, as well as, of course, I assume by extension, Notaral as well in that mix, just going at it at one another, going all in on that frontline war, which is quite an interesting prospect. I mean, again, I would love to see Gareth versus Notaral. We kind of had a, funnily enough, Danchro kind of did that, of course, right? If you guys have played Danmachi Battle Chronicle, one of their more, I would say, interesting events. One of the more interesting events was the sumo event between Gareth and Otarl, of course, right? That was quite an interesting event, in my opinion. I thought that was quite a fun thing to watch, of course, right? it was basically them duking out against each other, you know, just using their sumo skills, which was very interesting to say the least. You know, it was amazing to read, and of course Take Mikazuchi was also involved, which was amazing. But no, seeing them, you know, go in all together, it would be quite interesting to say the least. And to be honest, I feel like Gareth has been a character, even in Sword of Rotoria, I feel that we've not seen a lot of. You know, we've seen a lot of Finn, we've seen a lot of Riveria. I feel like Gareth is one of those characters that kind of goes under the radar. You know, he's one of the executives of the Loki Familia. He's effectively the other vice captain. You know, obviously you have the captain of the Loki Familia, which is Finn, and then you have the two vice captains in effectively Riveria and Gareth. They're basically the two vice captains, effectively. They're both deputy captains in their own way, basically. And while we see a lot of everybody else, you know, obviously Riveria we see a lot of because of her connection to Eyes and how she is basically like a second mother to Eyes, and of course the rest of the familia in general. You have of course Finn, who's you know battling with this ideology of being a fake hero, being a fake a false hero, even I should say, more so. And then of course growing from that, leading the familia, of course, right? You see a lot of that in Sword of Rotoria. But I feel like Gareth, you know, we see moments of him, but not like extra moments or like insane moments, or like even like you know, the same amount we see from Finn and Riveria, it feels like, at least, right? And so if we had the Loki Familia in the war games, right, it would be very interesting to say the least, and to see him be involved, of course, right, it would be a very interesting you know, matchup between Otarl and Gareth, of course, because I feel like it would be Eyes versus Hegni, and then Gareth versus Otarl primarily, and of course they would kind of interchange, you know, battling close to one another, you know, kind of teaming up, of course, right? And I think that's where things would be quite interesting, because I feel like, you know, in my opinion, right, that is going to be the big difference between the Loki Familia and Freya Familia, in all honesty, is I feel like the Loki Familia would be able to team up a lot better, whereas the Freya Familia, obviously they are a familia, they have worked together for a long time and everything, right, but they got issues. For a lack of a better way of putting it, they got issues, right? None of them are like in it together kind of thing. I feel like, you know, whenever you look at them fighting and everything, even in the anime and just generally over the, you know, span of just generally, you know, the season as well as previous light novels we've seen and everything, right, while they can work together, they can also not work together. They're very weird like that. I think, you know, if Finn is smart enough and Hayden is potentially preoccupied, right, you know, they could easily manipulate and take advantage of every single one of the top members of the Freya Familia and kind of put them into their own sort of circle, basically, to try and prevent them from teaming up, basically, and they themselves will encourage that somehow, you know, in a way. I feel like that's such a obvious thing to happen, it feels like, when it comes to in my opinion, it just inevitably, it does happen, in all honesty, in that situation, I feel like, between the Loki Familia and Freya Familia. The reason why they're able to get away with it, I think, against the Hestia Familia and the Alliance is just because of the sheer power level difference. You know, there's a huge difference between the Freya Familia and the Alliance, in that the Freya Familia is just so dominant, right? It's just so dominant in that sense, right? That I think it's easy for them to kind of ignore it. But I think against the Loki Familia, with a lot more level 6s involved, a lot more level 5s, a lot more level 4s, and so on and so forth involved, that it becomes a lot trickier to, you know, actually take advantage of you know, their overwhelming strength that you think that they have. You know, I do think that would be a bit of a problem on that front, of course, right? Fujino Omori goes on to basically talk about how, you know, the Freya Familia just has the sheer dominance on the healer front. That is where they will probably have a huge chance of being in the lead as well, because you have obviously Heath, or of course Andriamner, I hope that I pronounced that right, Andriamner, in that she is going to consistently heal them and keep them up and running throughout the entire fight. But if Riveria and the rest of the elf army, you know, Alicia, Lethvia, so on and so forth, you have Elfie as well mixed in with them as well, in terms of being a part of the mage side and everything, right? If they have the firepower to overpower the rear guard, depending on the situation, and this is what Omori says, is that depending on the situation, if Andriamner or Riveria fall first, whoever falls first will lose the rest of the fight, basically. So if Riveria falls, Loki Familia lose a huge advantage that they have. If Andriamner and Heath and the rest of the healers in the Freya Familia fall, they lose. And I kind of agree with that, because a lot of the people forget how strong the rear guard needs to be, and how important the rear guard is in supporting the field, right? At the end of the day, you are supporting it with, you know, potential, you know, outside of nowhere kind of like strikes and debuffs, supports, heals, whatever it may be, all of the above, basically, right? It is a huge difference maker. And so in that regard, I do think it's quite interesting, to be quite honest, to see who would come out on top of the rear guard between the Loki Familia and Freya Familia, because on one hand, I do think the Loki Familia has a bigger advantage in terms of the power, but I do think the Freya Familia has a bigger advantage in terms of the support, and that's where things get very interesting. So I do think that the Freya Familia's rear guard can get overpowered, but can they be outlasted? That's the different part. I think that is the very significant point to make an argument about. And I'm quite curious to see what you guys have to say in the comment section below, because I think, and if I were to put it in a very stagnant position like this without adding any other character, you know, of the Alliance or Hestia Familia or anybody else involved in this situation, I would potentially lean a little bit more towards the Loki Familia Loki still. I still think the Loki Familia just has the sheer firepower to win. And if they take down Heath, and I think Finn knows this as well, and that's where I think the advantage comes into play, is Finn knows this. And the other factor is, and this is something that, you know, Fujino Omori mentions as well, is that obviously, you know, that you also have a Horim that could come into play as well, you know, at long range. But the thing is, if he comes into play and tries to attack and, you know, moves away his focus from being the commander, being the tactician, the Loki Familia immediately get a big advantage, because now the Freya Familia is in disarray in the sense of they don't have a tactician, a commander to, you know, lead them into an organized win, basically, right? It's going to become disorganized. They are going to be split apart, and that's where Finn can come into play, because Finn can play the role of both rearguard and vanguard by extension, right? The way he is as a character, he can play both roles, and so he is able to manipulate himself into a position where he can still command the entirety of the Loki Familia while also being in a very flexible, a very fluid position, right? Which is quite a good advantage for the Loki Familia to have as well. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what would happen, but I think that's the reason why I think the Loki Familia has that big advantage from the rear guard side. Again, you know, as much as we'd like to say that, you know, having that level 6 advantage in Otarl is huge and everything, and don't get me wrong, it's a massive advantage. You have to remember that Otarl is probably on the higher side of level 7. This guy's been level 7 for over 6-7 years now. You know, this guy has been a level 7 adventurer for a very, very, very long time. And so he definitely does have a big advantage over a lot of these characters. And of course, no doubt, you obviously have Riveria, Finn, and Gareth also, who are very high level 6s as well. You have Ice, Bet, Tione, who are level 6, and they have their own perks as well that they can use to try and boost themselves to a high level 6, low level 7 potentially, right? But still, there is that advantage that Otarl has, and it all comes down to Otarl, in my opinion, for the Freya Familia, because I think over a period of time, depending on the execution and depending on the situations, I do think that the other executives of the Freya Familia could go down to the Loki Familia, in my opinion. The problem is them taking on Otarl, which is, I think, the bigger issue and the bigger concern and struggle. And that's where having and this is where I will say, if the Hestia Familia was still in play and the Alliance was still in play, I could see Horim just easily swinging it big time in the favor of Loki Familia. And obviously I think that's the reason why, obviously I think in the grand scheme of things, we didn't end up getting the Loki Familia in War Games, of course, partially because it would be a grand sweep in favor of the Alliance, man. I mean, let's not get it twisted. Horim level boosting the Loki Familia would just make it a joke, to be quite honest. But obviously, I do think that Omori still made the right decision in keeping them away from the War Games, in my opinion, because of the reasons that Royman gave. I think the reasons at least are good. It's not just like, oh, you're too strong. No, we can't have that. No, or Freya blackmailed me or something like that. No. It's a good. It was good reasons as to why the Freya Loki Familia was pushed to the side for the War Games. But I think if they were a part of it, let's say a part of it, I don't think it would have been as difficult, or it would have been way more towards the side of the Hesia Familia and the Alliance, to be quite honest. 100%, no doubt about it. It would be way too easy at that point. It would be way too easy. It would be a fun what if to talk about and discuss, but still, it would be, I think, way too easy in my opinion. Okay, so this is going to be quite interesting to say the least. So Alan is able to play around as much as he can, is what Omori says, because of course of his speed and his general agility and abilities. He's able to effectively manipulate the field to however he wants, and obviously is able to maybe potentially also counteract Finn's own calculations and tactics very easily. So Bet has to play a very big role here, of course, right? And then Hayden also has to be very careful as well, because when Bet uses his magic and his abilities, of course, right? His wolf and beastification abilities and all that sort of jazz, right? The entire War Games will be turned upside down. So Alan also has a very hefty responsibility. So I think, Bet versus Alan would just be a pure fist fight. This is the best way to put it. It would be just an utter pure fist fight to watch. It's not literally going to be a fist fight. I think Alan's going to use a spear and everything, but it will be a pure, well, actually, for lack of a better way of saying it, dog fight, even though Alan is a cat, but it would be a pure dog fight basically. And I'd be down to watch that. I'd pay for somebody to just animate a Bet versus Alan fight, because I think it would be an entertaining fight, to be quite honest. I think it would be a very, very entertaining fight. Two very stubborn, two very arrogant, two very egotistical characters going up against each other with their own strengths and advantages. I think I would be like loving the shit out of that, to watch that. I'd love it so much if they actually did that. Honestly, I really would be enjoying that massively. So it would be quite an interesting situation, right? Because I do think Alan has the downright speed advantage. There's no doubt about it, right? I think Alan is basically one of, if not the fastest character in Orario, basically, right? His speed is unparalleled. Vana Alfie, no doubt about it, right? But there is a huge advantage that Bet also has, in my opinion, in that in the way he is as a character as well, in all honesty, in the way he is as an adventurer, as somebody who's got the magic, who's got the skills, who's got the abilities. I mean, if we take a look at some of his skills, right, there's a lot that we could talk about Bet, man. Very underrated character, and something we could actually make a separate video talking about, but you look at his abilities, right? Ulf, I can't pronounce the name, I keep forgetting how to pronounce the name, but Ulf Hayden, I think is the name, is obviously insane. The only issue is, right, Ulf Hayden can't be utilized unless the moonlight is there. So I mean, depending on what time they can set the fight at, of course, right, this is assuming the Loki Familia can obviously negotiate and maybe add in a couple of caveats as to when the fight will take place and everything. If they do manage to get the moonlight part in, you obviously have Bet going absolutely nuts, right, becoming more beast-like, going absolutely nuts basically to another degree, right? But then you obviously have Hati as well. Hati would go insane as well. Beast of obviously, Hati is just his fire enchant magic that allows him to absorb a lot of damage and obviously also a lot of magic power as well, right? The only issue is, right, is that while it has no limit as to how powerful it can become, right, the bigger issue that Hati would have, in my opinion, is that it is it has a long chant, right, and obviously he can't, Bet simply cannot concurrent chant while he needs to, stay still. And in obviously the situation that he is, Alan is able to, obviously go all in with his speed and everything. It would be insane, basically, right? And it also is able to burn Bet as well. So there is a little bit of a, backside to obviously Hati as well. But, if he's able to take advantage of it, if he's able to, do a good job there, I mean, you are going to see a very, very strong Bet going up against Alan. It'll be very interesting to see, man. 2 level 6s going up against each other. It'll be very fascinating. It'll be very, very fascinating, to say the least, right? Now we move on to, of course, the next situation, which is, of course, Aaro, which is, I think, the big situation. I don't think the next situation, it is the situation, basically, right? So Aaro has kind of sort of basically given up on Finn, kind of effectively, because it's Aaro. He's kind of like, if Finn knows that it's a level 7, he is the strongest character. It's going to be very tricky to take him on effectively, right? So it's quite interesting as well. And then, of course, in the sense of Finn's side, right, Finn is going to try anything and everything to take him down, to the point where he's going to try and obviously make it happen in a very despicable way that the Fianna Knights will not be too happy, looking down on him, kind of, basically, right? So it is quite interesting, to say the least, as to how Omori's phrasing this. I don't know how Finn could manipulate Aaro into losing. I'm trying to think of the ways he could, and it's something that I might kind of talk about in my video when I do my what if iteration, of course, right? But it would be very interesting as well. Obviously, Omori says the rules will still be the same for the most part, no matter how things play out. He thinks, of course, right, generally he doesn't think the rules would change, if the Loki Familia was involved in the negotiations and, of course, at the advice of the rules. He says not much would change. And then, of course, he talks about potentially an extra factor as well, right? Is, of course, Horn's ability as well. Because remember that Horim could easily chuck Horn in the mix and get Horn to start charming individuals. Finn does have a mental charm resist effectively, right? And will probably crush Horn very easily, in all honesty. So in that sense, I think it'll be interesting, to say the least, as to what happens. But Omori does also say that the Freya Familia will immediately gain a huge advantage by putting Horn in the front line, because she will drag Finn to the front line immediately, rather than allowing him to be flexible, going between the rear guard and front guard and the front lines, or the vanguard. She'll have to drag him out immediately to the front to, of course, take down Horn, so that nobody else gets charmed from the Loki Familia, right? So that's going to be that is something to keep in mind as well. And then, of course, right, if I were to find the tweet, because it just scrolled me down for some reason, thanks Twitter, I really appreciated that. Omori then goes on to say that he thought about it in various ways and got very interesting, so he wrote a long post. What happens in an actual fight depends on the battlefield and the situation, so just think of this as a little bit of like an additional, like, oh, this could be the case, basically, this might happen. But no, I agree with whatever he said. I think it makes a lot of sense as to what he spoke about on a battlefront perspective and a battlefield perspective, right? Assuming everything is neutral, everything is, box standard, and all we have is the skills and abilities on paper, this would be the case. This 100% would be the case. But we do have to consider those factors, and I think it's kind of a shame he didn't consider the factors of like Horim and whatnot, knowing that the Hestia Familia would be there. They wouldn't just be ignored entirely, right? Bell will be there as well, so that's an additional factor to keep in mind, who could obviously help massively in the fight, generally speaking, right? So I am quite curious to see how it would have gone down if, you know, you had everybody in the mix, right? And not just the Loki Familia or not just the Alliance in the mix, right? So that is something that I might come up with in the near future, but I really love this. I really love this from Memoria, and I'm kind of sad that I didn't get to this quick enough. Of course, we had the delay coming up. We had, of course, all the Danchro stuff, the light novel stuff happening, right? So I had to kind of push this back quite a bit. I know this came out like on the 21st of December, which is like nearly 2 weeks ago now. But no, I'm glad that I've been able to come to it inevitably and talk about it. I think it's a very fascinating perspective, in all honesty, from Fujino Omori as well, in terms of generally how the war games would go with the Loki Familia involved as well. And yeah, I think he's spot on, by the way. I think everything else is close. There's something or the other going on that could happen, that could swing it in one way or another. But Aaro is the big one that they have to like acknowledge, because Aaro is like the game changer, in my opinion. One of the big game changers, in all honesty, for the fight, of course, right? Like he himself alone can swing it in so much of in favor of the Freya family. It's not even funny. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel for more content, and I will see you guys next time. Until the next one, take it easy, everybody. Bye bye.